Hi, I'm Nick Wright, and in this video we are going to talk about the Microsoft Deferred Compensation Plan. This is available to those of you who are level 67 and above at Microsoft. Some specific items we're going to talk about in this video: how much to defer, the cash flow planning that's involved, investment options, and then how to structure the payouts and some common mistakes that we typically see. If you're relatively new to deferred comp or were recently promoted, my colleague Erin Strand made a video recently, and she does a great job of providing an overview of how the plan works, deadlines to be mindful of, and really what the true benefit of utilizing deferred comp is. So again, if you're relatively new, highly suggest watching that video first, as we're going to jump into some more specific planning items as it relates to deferred compensation. So within Microsoft, you're compensated three different ways. You have stock grant income, salary, and then bonus. We have no control over the stock grant income. That will vest and it will be taxed as if it's ordinary income. We do have the option to adjust the tax withholding. But now that we do have deferred compensation available to us, we can now defer up to 75% of our salary and up to 100% of our bonus each year. Determining how much to defer into the deferred compensation plan, these are some things to think about or be mindful of. It's really all about creating a cash flow plan for the year in which these deferrals take effect. So having a really good understanding of how much income you'll be receiving, not only from Microsoft, but also if your spouse is working or you have other sources of income. What do expenses look like for the year? Are there any one-off expenses that you need to plan for? And then potentially you have some cash reserves currently, and maybe these can be used for covering living expenses and perhaps stretching that rubber band a little bit more. When you're putting together the cash flow plan, it's really important to also take into account the stock grant income. This is really the key to fully leveraging deferred compensation. Oftentimes we see the vesting shares pile into an investment account, and over time it turns into just a large concentrated position of Microsoft stock. But if we start to think about these shares more so like cash compensation and start to sell these shares as they vest, we can then supplement our living expenses, and this allows us to fully leverage deferred compensation and get closer to those deferral limits that we were just looking at. Investment options within deferred compensation, very similar to the 401k plan. There's 24 investment options. You can reallocate these at any time. The most important thing to remember here, or to be mindful of, is that each election you make, whether it's for bonus or salary, each election will have or can have a different investment allocation. Whether you choose to use the same investment options for each or mix them up between deferrals, that's up to you. But just know that every time you go in to make a new election, you will have to elect how those dollars will be invested. So when you're structuring the payouts within deferred compensation, you have two options. You first have a lump sum payment. So this is all paid out at once. You can choose for it to be paid out at termination or choose a specific month in a given year. The other option would be annual installments. This can range from 3 to 15 years. And again, you have two options there: either start at termination or begin in a specific month in a specific year. So when it comes to structuring the payouts for deferred compensation, very similar to the cash flow planning that needs to be done when we determine how much to defer, but we need to start thinking in terms of future income sources post-Microsoft or beginning in retirement. So when do we expect to retire? Will we be a 55-15 employee? Required minimum distributions beginning at 72, and then these other types of incomes that people typically have in retirement: Social Security, pensions, maybe the possibility of some part-time work. Lastly, for the payouts, there is a 5-year redeferral rule. So if you make an election for a payout, you can only push that payout at least 5 years into the future. We cannot pull those payouts any closer or bring those forward whatsoever. So let's take a look at an example of future income sources. Let's say in this example, someone's retiring on January 1st. Perhaps they are a 55-15 employee, meaning they'll have continued vesting of Microsoft shares. They have their spouse's Social Security, perhaps their own Social Security at some point, and then planning for required minimum distributions beginning at age 72. This is the type of planning that's involved in order to fully maximize and leverage deferred compensation, because we want to make sure that these payouts are occurring in years in which we're pretty sure we're going to have less income. And if you do this planning ahead of time, what you can then start to do with the deferral elections is ensure that these payouts are occurring in years in which we have less income. We can create a stream of income that's pretty level, and then again also being paid out in years in which we expect to have less income and be in those lower marginal tax brackets. Lastly, some of the common errors or mistakes that we see more so on the payout side of things. First, having payouts start at termination. We looked just at that example where if you have those payouts beginning too early, you'll have some overlap with potentially those continued vesting shares from being a 55-15 employee. Also, starting too late or going too long on the annual installments. We tend to see payouts occurring when both Social Securities are being collected or overlapping required minimum distributions, which can be pretty significant for someone working at Microsoft and taking advantage of the 401k for so long. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this information useful. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, reach out to me directly, or check out our Microsoft Benefits resource page. We have a ton of videos, blog posts on how to fully leverage and maximize your benefits as a Microsoft employee.